Hello and welcome to this week's video. It's time to review episode 3 of volume 5 of Vigilantes, episode titled Equipment Issues. Something that many people have to deal with later in life. Ha ha ha! Willy joke! Anyway, let me know what you thought about this episode down in the comment section down below, and you will be around in a future video. Whilst you're there, be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube wants you to do, because YouTube is an increasing this current place of small broadcasters. Support your local small broadcaster today, will do them a power of good, and we're marching slowly onwards towards 105 subscribers. If we break that goal, then I'll be reviewing this second My Hero Academia movie, as that's the only movie in this series I've not done a review of yet. But between then and now, let us get on to this week's video. We're going to be reviewing the previously mentioned episode. I'm going a little bit off script this week because why not? Let's have a little bit more dynamism and flair to things. So let us start off, as we often do, by talking about the positives. So after a slightly heavier episode last week, even if it's only realistically kind of slightly heavier, we're now met with one that's a little bit lighter, one that I feel that keeps a lot closer to the tone and spirit of the series as a whole than the first episode of this volume. Again, don't have any issues with that humour, I just think that this feels more keeping in the kind of stuff that My Hero Academia is best at. It's very situational humour, and by and large it just feels a little bit more universal. It's something that you can enjoy regardless of, well, whether how much or not you like superhero fiction. The opening action sequence is something that it can work with any kind of superhero series, well, aside from the current Snyderverse-inflected DC movies, or at least when their executives try to force humour into them, but that's a whole other discussion for a whole other time. The humour that we see in this episode is very situational. It plays well with these characters, and it's something that can almost work in any of the series if you wanted it to, but it works here and now because it is just good with these particular characters. I do really enjoy this opening action sequence where we get with the main characters. It works for me on two levels. First of all is the fact that it's just simply fun and funny, showing Crawler getting in way over his head, and the fake Wolverine and fake Cyclops guy just taking the piss out of him, going, wow, you're just such a crappy hero, and it all ends up setting up for Captain Celebrity having to save the day later on, which itself sets up for him having to illustrate as to why Vigilantes can be a hindrance. And of course there's the simple fact that I think that this fight sequence, short as it is very well drawn and presented, has a flair and dynamism to it that I honestly kind of enjoy. It isn't the best or most imaginative action sequence we've had in the series thus far, but it's still enjoyable for what it is. It has a great fluidity to it. It shows Crawler using his powers in as interesting a way as he possibly can do, bearing in mind that at the moment his power is just pretty much just sliding around like a human hovercraft, as he's not really regained that flying power that he had a few volumes ago at this point. I do enjoy the fun little banter that we have between our cast. I think it helps to add a more lived-in, more realistic sense of who they are as people. Again, that opening sequence is great. Every member of our cast injects themselves into that sequence of events in a way which feels really great, even though it feels like most of them are more interested in promoting themselves rather than protecting or helping Crawler. Even Popstep, who just stops the fight midway through to promote an upcoming gig. It's one of those kind of just sudden shifts in focus that almost feels like when you get a YouTuber doing a promotional bit. Like, it feels like it's going, and we interrupt this fight to get a word from our sponsors, World of Shadow Tank Aprons. Buy them today. Woo! It's just something totally out of left field, and I really do like that. It's fun. It really is fun for what it is, and I think that it adds something to it. It adds something that it feels a lot more, again, in keeping with the tone and feeling of the series than the opening episode of this season really did, or rather the opening episode of this volume. And of course, then later this is added to when we get Captain Celebrity trying to hide from Makoto. You know, despite the fact he's a pro hero and he's known and beloved across Japan, he's running scared from a doctorate student. You know, she hasn't quite finished her course yet. She's not quite graduated from this particular part of her university career, and here she is calling the shots over a successful hero, one that's been successful in 2 major countries. Like, just him hiding and trying to get away from it, I just think's fun. I really did enjoy all that stuff. Of course, all that does, like I say, help us pivot into the more important drama here when we talk about Captain Celebrity and when he decides to have his word with Crawler. Yes, when I say drama, I am going to be honest here and now. It's not the heaviest drama, it's not the most intense drama, and to really call it drama at all is something of a misnomer because it isn't that dramatic, though it is just the character pretty much putting their cards on the table here. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know if it's an age thing, but I think that in this actual sequence where we see Crawler and Captain Celebrity having their talk, I can't help but feel that Captain Celebrity does have a point here. In this little confrontation with Crawler, he goes on about how Crawler keeps getting himself into these situations where he's biting off more than he can chew and it's not helping anybody, and how Captain Celebrity has to keep dragging his ass out the fire to stop Crawler getting into a bad way or making things far worse. Crawler is quite happy to get himself into these disasters willingly. It's not like it's just a byproduct of him being a hero, a byproduct of him being a sidekick or a freelance sidekick, as they mention in this particular episode. He's going out of his way to get into there. And I have this feeling that had I been reading this at a younger age, I'd have been thinking, oh, get lost, he's saving the day, what else is he supposed to do? He's there when the heroes can't be there. He's doing a good thing, but in the here and now, I can't help but think about all those times that you hear about have-a-go heroes getting involved in stuff in real life and it going horribly wrong, and then you imagine that happening in a world where people have superpowers, and imagining how wrong it really can do. This is something that we do kind of see a hint of with Gentle Criminal in the main series, and how his life ended up progressing after he tried to be a have-a-go hero after his studies went to crap. And to be fair to Crawler, he does make a good counterpoint against Captain Celebrity in saying that, and this is something that has been mentioned throughout the Vigilantes series up until this point, is the fact that superheroes aren't always there, despite the fact that this is a world where 80% of the population have superpowers. Only a small fraction of that actually are superheroes, and they aren't always going to be there. Sometimes they'll arrive late, if at all. Sometimes the big-name celebrity who, like your Endeavours or your All Mights or your Best Genists, aren't going to be there to deal with, petty crooks. They're not going to be going around knocking the local drug dealer on the head. They're going to stop the drug cartels. They're not going to be there to stop the guy that's speeding. They're going to stop the person that's running the big international chop shop operation. They might stop these people if they find them, but they're not going out of the way to necessarily stop them, which is where Crawler and people like him come in. It's their job to fill the gap when the more celebrity superheroes and just pro heroes in general aren't there. They're that gap between police and pro heroes. So from that point of view, I understand that. Though, with that said, there is a part of me that still swings towards Captain Celebrity's point of view, because it's all well and good being there to stop the old woman getting mugged on the edge of the street, but that's not what Crawler's doing. That's not what Crawler and Propstep are doing. They're going out of their way to put themselves in that situation. They're looking for the muggings. They're looking for the chop shops. They're looking for the drug dealers or what have you. They're going out of their way to cause trouble, to prevent trouble, if you want to put it like that. And at the end of the day, it feels like this whole conversation is Captain Celebrity advocating to Crawler to, at the end of the day, know his limits and know what to do in situations like this. Because as we see in this episode, Crawler really does bite off more than he can chew. He's facing off against a villain that's faster and far more durable than him. Crawler is a speedster. He's about speed. He's not about strength. And he's fighting against something that can slice him in half. Of course, in this episode, we do see that part of his costume, his beloved trademark limited edition All Might hoodie, gets sliced up, and, well, he's going to be crying himself to sleep after that. Now, to be fair, all of this does feel like it is somewhat in keeping with what we've had with Knuckleduster and him not seemingly knowing when to fold them, so to speak. He's taking time out from now on because he wants to spend time with his daughter and to try and rebuild their relationship. Maybe he will at some point in the future become a vigilante again. I'm sure that maybe by the end of this volume we might have one big final fight with him to just round him off and give him something of a send-off, but in the here and now he's out of it, and it is kind of bearing back to that. It's Crawler having to learn that sooner or later he has to know which fights to get involved with and which not to. On the subject of Knuckleduster, it does feel like his absence is starting to become a lot more obvious to Crawler and Propstep. It feels like that whole absence is starting to become the centre of this season, with our heroes having to get used to life with him not being there and learning how to find their own way. How exactly all this will manifest as yet, I really don't know. And there is a part of me that worries that whole thing of them finding their own way, thinking about how they can become the vigilantes and the heroes that they were always meant to be, is something that's going to get pushed to the side slightly. At the end of the day, that does feel like that's going to be the overarching arc for them for the rest of the series as a whole, but for the here and now in this season, there is a part of me that worries that it's going to get pushed to one side by something else. Something bigger is going to come along and steal its thunder. You can call that paranoia, but there is a part of me that's thinking, okay, so what else could end up happening here? Well, we have the thing with Knuckleduster not coming back at all, which itself could overpower that. We have the stuff with Knuckleduster trying to make an amends with his estranged daughter. That itself can end up becoming the main focus of it. We have the potential for a new villain coming through into all of this. So this whole thing of them having to realise, yeah, Knuckleduster's not going to be around anymore, might not get the necessary level of focus I honestly think it needs to. Though with that said, you know, that's just the way that things are. You can't really criticise it too much, bearing in mind that we're only just 3 episodes into what is itself an 8-episode run, so maybe we'll see a little bit more of that. Maybe the realisation, oh, Knuckleduster's not coming back, will be made, but we'll soon see about that. But we are, at this moment, seeing about how our main cast are starting to move on with their lives without him anyway. As mentioned previously, albeit jokingly, the whole gig that Popstep was doing over the past few weeks is back again. We likely won't end up seeing it in the main series, it'll just be something that happens in the background, but that's her getting on with her career. Her and Crawler going out there and helping dealing with villains on the daily, that's them getting on with their lives. Them becoming freelance sidekicks is them getting on with their lives. They're starting to move on with their lives without Knuckleduster, but I think that there needs to be this more conscious effort of them doing that. As at the moment it just feels like a case of, Knuckleduster will be back any day now, we just gotta wait and see how things go. And that doesn't really feel to me like it's setting up for them realising themselves. It just feels, I don't even know how to explain it, so I'm going to move on into something I can talk about in a little bit more focus, which is to talk about the negatives. And I will admit there isn't many negatives with this one. The only major negative I can come to, and even then I use the word major very loosely, is the fact that we have I think this is the 5th time where we get the word vigilante explained to us. I know that there is this Stan Lee-like principle where you have to treat every comic like it's someone's first, and to be fair, the word vigilante probably isn't a common turn of phrase in Japan, but it is one of those things that it does stick out to you, and it does kind of lose itself a little bit more when you're reading this in the English language, because this is a turn of phrase they're very familiar with, and having it repeated over and over and over again, it does feel like it's taking time away from stuff that could be done otherwise. But at the same time, you can't really do a translation of this if you suddenly decide that for those 3 or so panels where you're explaining what the word vigilante is, you do something else. I mean, never know, what would you do in place of it? You would just, you set up for some kind of weird joke, you set up for something else that's going on, I really don't know. But it is, like I say, a minor negative that I have towards this one. The only other negative, I suppose, is that it does feel like, to kind of echo what I've just said previously towards the end of the positives, that the whole thing of Knuckleduster not being around anymore, it feels like they're not quite committing to it really as they should do. The revelation that he isn't there is something that should be coming to the fold a lot more right now. Again, as a counterpoint to that, I do feel that the way that they are handling it, I think the pacing of it works. I think the fact of this being a gradual, slow realisation that he's not going to be there anymore, I think works a lot better than having some kind of cliched, big, tearful moment thing of him bowing out and saying goodbye to them. Him just not being part of their lives anymore, I think sets up for something more keeping with him as a character, and I think helps them as people come to terms with the fact he isn't going to be there anymore. They need to learn to do this themselves. They don't need to get their hand held through it and need to feel as though they can just rely back on him as, oh no, things have gone wrong, can you help us again? They're learning to do this on their own, which is fine. with all that said, let's get into the overview. And I have to say that this is a very, very solid episode. I love the humour in this one. I really do like that. I think that it is far keeping in the tone and feel of the series as a whole entity, far more so than other stuff that we've had recently. But of course there is that still feeling of, okay, we need to round some of this stuff off now. We need to start rounding off the stuff with Knuckleduster, because it just feels like a loose plot thread here. Him and his daughter, that stuff needs to be, if not resolved, then we need to at least draw a line under it for the time being. We probably will get that by the end of this volume, but how long is that going to be? Is that going to be the big final emotional crescendo moment of this volume? Or is this going to be something we see in the next couple episodes? So I don't know, but we need to deal with that, because Knuckleduster's absence is becoming increasingly conspicuous to our characters, and there's only so many times you can have them going, oh boy, where's Knuckleduster, because it starts to feel like, oh boy, where's Poochie, but we'll see where all that goes. With all that said and done, however, let's get into Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner! Very impromptu jingle there. Don't know why I did that, but hey ho, it's time for Comment Corner, and back once again like a renegade master, it's Big X1 who says, of course this is referring to last week's review on the previous episode, this one is enjoyable enough, but it feels like it's dragging its feet with the stuff with Knuckleduster and his daughter. Thank you for your comment, and I'll be honest, I'm a little bit in two minds with all of this. On the one hand, it does feel like it's dragging its feet, because still, what is it now, 3 weeks into this, it feels as though we've not really made any major progress with it. Yet at the same time, it does feel as though it's setting up for this to be the emotive arc of the entire volume, and as from a pacing point of view, I think it's doing it rather well. And it is avoiding any cliches of anyone just suddenly having like a deathbed conversion, for want of a better phrase. Even though that certainly doesn't feel like it's the direction it's going with it, literally. It is disappointing, of course, that given that this is the major point for his character, possibly the thing that's going to define it and round it off so that they disappear from the show entirely, the fact that they're just kind of putting it on standby, putting it in the background so much feels a little bit odd to me. And it does regrettably make some of the things that's happening in the foreground, so to speak, feel a little bit like filler. Even though it really isn't. There's a lot of good stuff from this week's issue and last week's issue, though it does feel as though it's a case of, okay, can we get a little bit more with Knuckleduster and Tamo, please? Can we get that? Because this is really interesting stuff, but you keep putting it to the side now. And as I mentioned in the past, it does make me paranoid that it might get largely forgotten or just pushed to one side while something more interesting comes along. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Anyway, thank you all for listening. Normal service will resume next week. That's not to say there was anything abnormal about this week, but, you know, I've been busy with a few things. I did an awards show last Saturday from when you're listening to this. And you can, there's probably a link to that in the video description somewhere along the lines. I've also got an esports thing coming up, so I don't know how that's going to affect future videos. Probably shouldn't affect them too much, but we'll see about that. But anyway, thank you all for listening, and see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!